Alright, well, welcome to my final exam project for Theory of Knowledge. My name is Carter Null, and we will be discussing color blindness and sense perception. First of all, what is color blindness? Color blindness, also known as color vision deficiency, is the decreased ability to see colors or differences in color. And by differences in color, they mean that the ratio, basically, of hues in which a non-colorblind person could differentiate uh, colors from each other, and a colorblind person could. It's about 100 to 20, so that's pretty significant. The most common cause of color blindness is inherited fault in the development of one or more three sets of color sensing cones in the eye. There are red and green color blindness, and that's the most common. There's blue and yellow color blindness, and total color blindness. So what color causes color blindness? Color blindness is linked to the X chromosome. First off, we should understand that. So what that means is if one X chromosome says spread, if one X chromosome calls for color blindness, the other can call against it and trump it. So essentially, if you have two X chromosomes, women, you have a better chance of having that colorblindness trait trumped, whereas men just have an X chromosome and a Y, so there's no chance for that. It's either they have it, they don't. There are no carriers. Cones and rods are found in the retina, which is a little bit behind the lens of the eye. Rods detect shapes, which helps us see. I mean, obviously that's important to see shapes, but it also helps us see in the dark. And colors, the cones detect colors. There are three types of cones: red cones, blue cones, and green cones, and they all come together kind of like, if you look really closely at a comic book, to give us all of the colors that we are physically capable of seeing. So it's pretty remarkable. The exact physical cause of color blindness is unknown, but it is believed that color blindness is caused by either faulty cones or by faulty pathway to the brain. Most people see colors utilizing the three cones. Color blindness occurs when at least one of these three cones is faulty. So, personal knowledge, shared knowledge. And, the personal knowledge isn't my personal knowledge. I decided to go about this by the personal knowledge being that of someone who is colorblind. So, someone who's colorblind has extensive personal knowledge in day-to-day obstacles, refined appreciation for colors, and by that, of course, I mean we take that for granted. If we, those of us who aren't colorblind, we take for granted being able to see all of the colors and that we can see, and that's not something that's guaranteed. There's limited mental color spectrum. That is, someone who's never seen the color orange, or excuse me, red, will not. They can perhaps grasp the concept of red and know that it would be on a certain wavelength and frequency and so forth, and at certain intensity, and maybe it's between something or other, but they will not be able to actually see the color red when they think of it in their heads. There's also difficulties in describing objects by color or being described objects by color. And knowledge of potential synesthesia is something that would be personal, respective to someone who is colorblind. So, shared knowledge. This is things that we accept communally, and that is how color blindness occurs. We may not know the exact cause, but we accept how it occurs. There are the two theories I mentioned earlier. Then there's the frequency of color blindness, and that's in regards to how constant it is around the globe, and also that it happens more often with men than women. Their occupations affected, their cultural view of color blindness that we all understand, and their accommodations for colorblind people. Color blindness on a global scale. So, this is important. It appears all throughout the globe. It's not just an American thing or something like that. It's everywhere. And color blindness may make it difficult or impossible for a certain person to engage in occupations, and certain laws prevent people with color blindness from having certain occupations. So that principle originates from the Legerunda train crash of 1875 in Sweden, where an individual was in charge of this train, and it obviously crashed, and it was because he was colorblind, and it set forth this precedent that perhaps there are some occupations in which a colorblind person should not be able to that apply for things of that nature. So some countries, for example Romania, have refused to grant driver's license to individuals with color blindness. Now, that's a bit extreme. Obviously, someone who's colorblind can still be able to drive their ways. They may think differently of it, but it is certainly possible. There's actually been a lot of resistance to that in Romania in particular. The inability to distinguish colors does not necessarily preclude the ability to become a celebrated artist. Clifton Pugh was a very celebrated colorblind Australian artist. He actually won all sorts of awards from Australia in particular. So culturally, being able to participate in certain jobs and being able to create certain art and whatnot, that has an effect. Uh, and that's important. It varies from culture to culture, just as all cultures vary. But essentially, it comes down to these principles that I'm listing off. The classic green over red traffic lights, this is a good example, have been challenged in the United States for being dangerous to people who are colorblind. Essentially, there's the green, the yellow, the red stop, green go, so forth. And when that started being used, people thought, given that we have red cones and green cones in particular, perhaps it's not a great idea to use those two colors on the same very important function, the traffic lights. So that has an effect on people in the way that they resist that. Some countries are very accepting. However, Brazilian court ruled that people with color blindness are protected by the Inter-American Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against People with Disabilities. So some cultures are a bit more accepting. And on a global scale, this is all pretty applicable. Primary way of knowledge, sense perception. So this is what I'm getting at. And there's no better way I could explain this to you. It's sensory. So in its nature, you sort of have to perceive it. Anyways, there's normal sight in the top left. Then there's green and red color blindness, and you'd see it's a bit more yellow. And then there's red and yellow color blindness. Now, yellow is kind of a bright color. So you see here that it's a bit darker, and the colors are a bit more red. And again, look at the normal sight and comparison. It's very different. Then there's complete total blindness. And what that is that's all three of the cones would be rendered useless somehow, and you don't see colors. You're only using your rods. You can see structures. You can even see brightness, but you cannot see the colors. So specifically this way of knowing enriches our understanding, because it's one thing I can describe color blindness all day and you can understand the concept, but when it comes down to it, actually perceiving it with your senses, with your vision, is important. So, subordinate way of knowledge, intuition. Vision is intuitive. An accurate vision is also intuitive. We see colors or brightness relative to our cones and rods, understand what we are seeing without even having to think, and that's what makes it intuitive. I can look at orange and think, I don't even need to name that it's orange, but I'm perceiving the essence of orange coming off of it visually. So now, consider the deltas to the right of the writing. When you saw them, were you immediately able to process them as different colors without naming them necessarily? That's important. That's intuitive. I was able to see that top delta and see that it's different from the bottom and the one beneath that and so forth. And I was able to differentiate that without even thinking of it. It's intuitive. Now, second order knowledge question. To what extent can knowledge be inhibited? This question makes us consider how color blindness can inhibit an area of knowledge. for example, sensory knowledge, imaginary knowledge, subordinate knowledge in this case. This question can be extended to other real-life scenarios in which an area of knowledge is inhibited. It can be any. That's why I kept it specific. I was going to have it say, to what extent can knowledge be inhibited by physical disabilities, but I thought that's not specific enough. So I eliminated that, and it's now just this. The effects, here's an example, the effect of sleepiness on one's cognitive ability to process information. So if you don't sleep enough, to what extent can knowledge be inhibited? That's obviously applicable. Another example, the effects of the English language structure on our thoughts and how we perceive information. To what extent can knowledge be inhibited by that, by the structure of the English language? So essentially, I hope you've gotten from this presentation a new perspective of looking at color blindness, and I hope it's enriched your ability to utilize your different areas of knowledge and ways of thinking. Thank you very much.